Okay, so it gives me a great honor really to have the closing panel of this event, and to even more excited to have one of the coolest and best accelerators, incubators in the world today. So we have Techhub, Founders Factory, State Zero, and Rainmaking together. So yeah, let's start by introducing each other, and I would like to start ladies first.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm the founder of State Zero Labs, and we're very much looking at blockchain for enterprise and the applications aside from cryptocurrencies to try and provide a real platform to highlight really what the tech can actually do in business, and to cut through some of the hype that a lot of the hype that we've had over the last kind of 18 months to 2 years. Oh, right or left? Do you want to go? Should I go right?
I can do that, sure. Thanks, Peter. Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Sturm. I'm the head of Incubation at Founders Factory Africa. We are a venture development lab. We do two things. We both accelerate existing startups from across the continent, investing resources and our operational and sort of technical expertise in scaling them. And on the other side, we also have a venture development lab where we build our own startups from the ground up and launch them into market.
Thanks. Good afternoon. My name's Jordan. I'm one of the founders at a company called Rainmaking. And at Rainmaking, you'll probably better know us via our Startup Accelerator Network, Startup Bootcamp, which is one of the largest global Startup Accelerator Network programs around. Similar to that, we also have a corporate innovation consultancy business working with just over about 80 Fortune 500s around the world. And we also do venture building. So we have investment vehicles, not to invest in startups, that we do through Startup Bootcamp, but to build new startups in partnership with our Fortune 500 corporate partners.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Andrew Tibbits. I am Chief Operating Officer of Techhub. Techhub, you might know, was one of the first startup support initiatives in London back in 2010 on Old Street Roundabout. We've since worked with over 3,000 London-based technology businesses and a number in tech hubs now internationally as well. And we do that through effectively providing a support program, trying to make introductions to the right people within the investment community, with major corporates, and also helping people hire the right engineering teams and that sort of stuff as well. We partly fund that through working with some of the world's leading corporates, such as Google, BT, Deloitte, and a number of others, generally trying to find specific solutions to challenges which they have. We now are based slightly further down the road away from the roundabout, but home to about 400 companies in a 50,000 square foot co-working space just from Old Street Roundabout. So.
Amazing. Thank you for introduction. So I would like to ask a first question, which is about what do you think it's one of the most important things that startups actually can get from one of your programs?
And really, our role, how we see our role, is about breaking down barriers for startups, right? Whether that's connections to corporates, whether that's connections to investors. And that's, especially in blockchain right now, it's really tough for a startup to go in and sell a blockchain solution to a corporate, which is actually why we try and flip that conversation from I'm a blockchain company, which doesn't really mean much, to what problem am I solving and who am I doing it for? And we find that when the conversation flips, and that's a big role that we play, is helping them shape the conversation and their business model and making sure that they can sell it properly, we find that then it clicks better with organizations because, you know, realistically, when tech works, it starts to fade into the background and no one really cares what it's using as long as it works for them and solves a problem. So I think it's our role is very much helping shape that messaging as a business. At State Zero Labs, we have a huge focus on empowering tech to stay human. So we do a lot of work with our companies on their purpose and their mission and how understanding the impact of your technology on people and on society. The better you understand that, the better you can sell it. And we've found it actually means companies, startups especially, find it easier to go to a corporate and explain what they're doing when they really understand what their true purpose and true mission is. And it takes a lot of work to do that. And you know, you need frameworks and you need experts. And we are definitely not the experts. We bring in lots of other experts to help out our startups. But I think ultimately, you know, that's the purpose of all of us is to make it. And it's not easy, right? It's freaking tough being an entrepreneur. And, you know, they're a unique character being an entrepreneur. I say that as a founder, but I don't really class myself in the same kind of category. Maybe imposter syndrome a little bit there. But I think it's really important to understand the journey that an entrepreneur goes on and how different it is and how tough it is and try and, you know, make it as easy on them as physically possible.
I think the most fascinating and brilliant thing about London, as you all know, is that most people from London or that call themselves Londoners weren't born or bred here. I mean, in Techhub on a daily basis, we have 60 nationalities of founders. And whilst our ecosystem now provides a very different investment environment to what it did 7 or 8 years ago, the majority of people are still raising, you know, money from friends, family, and fools, at least to get them to the first point of starting to create some revenue. And so the value and density and networks and initiatives like all of ours are is pretty, you know, of unimaginable value to people who are new to a city and understand the opportunity of a city with a 10 million population and with, you know, 500 international headquarters of global businesses, etc. So it's being an outsider and then suddenly being part of something where you can very quickly access things you could never achieve on your own.
From a value to startups, well, from a program basis, the only programs that we have are accelerator programs. And I think the context there needs to be viewed as to what startup ecosystem are we talking about. In mature markets like London, I think the value to the startups is less and less. Huge mentor fatigue, so the mentor-driven value from that perspective is dwindling. A lot of the misconception as well is corporates often engage with an accelerator program hoping for corporate startup engagement where they can do something commercial in that pilot or post-pilot with startups. By definition, every accelerator stage startup is far too early to do anything meaningful with a big corporate. So the corporates are wasting their time, the startups are wasting their time, so it's not really about that. And in mature ecosystems, the corporates have woken up to that, because again, they've done these programs, they're less willing to engage with pre-Series A startups. Understandably so. However, for first-time founders with a good, if you're in the top quartile of accelerator programs around the world, you can add a hell of a lot of value to the founders, predominantly through the education curricula, and accelerating both the individuals, the team, and then the businesses themselves. But in an early stage ecosystem, I think they have even more value because the network and the excitement from the mentors and the investors, the accelerator programs really become a genuine sort of growth hack, if you will, a physical rallying point to bring all that stuff together to make things happen that wouldn't really have happened without the accelerator program in the startup ecosystem.
So I recognize that we operate in a very different market. We're based in Johannesburg. We are Pan-African. So we operate in 54 markets across the continent. It is obviously much less mature, though I would argue that we represent like significant oversaturation. And I would argue there are far too many programs and too much mentorship and too many networks. And I agree with Jordan that the value therein has started to dry up. The way we differentiate ourselves is we build. We are co-designers, we are co-builders. We don't run a program with our accelerator businesses. We work with them and apply our team. We have a team of 50 technical experts. We have an operational team. It includes coders, data scientists, blockchain experts, an investment and finance team, business development, all the resources that a business, a venture, an accelerator stage needs to grow that they can't access, that they can't afford. We believe that that's what grows businesses. Resources grow businesses. People grow businesses. Mentorship is wonderful. It's important for personal development. It's important for entrepreneurs to learn from others who have gone before them. But mentorship doesn't grow businesses. Networks and introductions don't grow businesses. Resources and people do. And so I think what we do is we put world-class resources that ventures otherwise couldn't access behind our businesses. And we will write code and we'll write algorithms and we will we will work on financial models along with them. So the way we kind of overcome that mentorship fatigue is we don't mentor, we co-design and we build.
It's more Founders Factory is more also a startup factory, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean we this I'll pull back the kimono a little bit. We have a lot of conversations and arguments internally about the terms accelerator and incubator, because they are. I mean, I think it's they're wildly overused. I will speak in Africa. They are the connotation is run by corporates, come in, they don't know what they're doing, they take equity and then leave you with nothing 6 months later after a program that anybody could have done off the internet. So we call ourselves very deliberately a venture development company, and we do venture design and we do building for that purpose.
I believe everyone will agree with me when I say that accelerator model is broken, has been broken for some time, and then there's like a fine line between incubation and acceleration here. But you guys run most of the acceleration processes, however, you run with Rainmaking also incubation as well. Can you potentially tell the difference between those things?
Good. We don't do incubation, because incubation, from my understanding in the tech ecosystem, is it originated really from a VC standpoint. If you're a seed stage VC and you invested in your portfolio companies and you had a physical space, you would then provide the option for some of your portfolio companies to basically reside under your space. And it made catching up with your portfolio companies around the water cooler a little bit easier, but very light touch. Incubation. It's like a nest with some eggs. That is what incubation actually is, right? So from our perspective, do we do that? We don't have an investment fund that directly invests in startups in that way. I think venture capital is a terrible investment asset class. Honestly, we've invested in 750 startups through Startup Bootcamp. Am I relying on that equity for my pension? Hell no. So, from my perspective, it's like when we talk about when we engage, the vast majority of our business is very much working with Fortune 500s, right? And the startups that touch us in a non-programmatic way to engage with Fortune 500s deliver massive commercial results for both parties. But that isn't mistaking this BS of looking at an accelerator program and go, oh, we should have a start date and an end date and a cohort and all that nonsense. The biggest mistake is, it's really irresponsible, quite frankly. The accelerator model was originally a growth hack on early stage deal flow. So when YC started in 2005 and then Techstars in 2007, and everyone's essentially been copying the mentor-driven approach by Techstars, because YC doesn't do that. They're not 3 months. They don't do any of that. So when you look at that program, originally it was an early stage seed VC saying, how do I get the top 1% of deal flow to basically invest, right? And now it's like, oh, we have applications, and we have this carrot, and hundreds of startups apply. And the best form of due diligence at that stage is relative to each other. You roughly hit a stick at the top 10, done, there's your portfolio. Unfortunately, that industry is blown up such that the deal flow is no longer viable from a venture perspective. Yet a lot of people who are the MDs running these programs, who want to help out entrepreneurs, who want to impact startup ecosystems, wanted to keep their programs running. Where does the money come from? Because if governments aren't going to fund it, especially after a while, where does it come from? Oh, we'll go to corporates. In the early days, it was literally marketing money. Have some marketing, we'll put your brand out there, you'll be seen as being innovative, great, great, great. Very, the value proposition was very intangible at best. And that is the truth of it. What has then happened is just mental to my eyes. It's like that business model and the accelerators haven't innovated, they haven't changed, but they basically deserve to die. So, speaking from an owner of that business, like the growth of Startup Bootcamp is in emerging ecosystems. LATAM, right? Africa, Southeast Asia, Middle East. That makes sense in the early days for those ecosystems. From a corporate standpoint, I'm like...
No, I was going to ask, because I think all of us work with, I imagine, all of us have some corporate connection. I think it's right, like it has become the driving point behind the accelerator ecosystem because it's seen as a way to innovate for a corporate, right? A large corporate venture fund that doesn't know what they're doing, they can't do it in-house, and they reach out to the likes of us. And I think we all engage with them in different ways. I mean, I'm curious, for all you guys, what it is what role corporates play, and is there, if the money's not going to come from government, it's going to come from corporates, and I think we can all agree that corporates don't I apologize to anybody here who is from a corporate venture arm, frequently don't know what they are doing in the space, and the value proposition is muddy. Like, what is the role for them? Like, the way that we, and I say that the way that we have approached it is, we don't, our investor, our corporates are invested in us. They are our equity investors. So we are not partnering with them. They are not sponsoring us. We're not building for them. They have invested in us, and that's our approach. It is one approach, but I'm curious because I know everybody here is trying to tackle that problem.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to ask the next question about the
I
corporate
apologize.
acceleration and your thoughts, but
switch seats.
Yeah, it's normally natural. I just want to see show of hands. Are there any corporates in the room? Yeah, a few. Okay, and how about startups? Do we have startups in the room? Loads of startups. Okay, and investors maybe? Few investors. Okay, good. Okay, so please go on.
I kind of sit in the middle of the two here, in that literally as well. But to be really honest with you, especially working in the blockchain space and the enterprise space, when we've had so much hype around the technology for usually the wrong reasons for the last 24 months, I slightly disagree on the corporate side because actually they don't have a freaking clue most of the time. And when they come to us and say, I want to use blockchain, and we're like, what the hell for? And most of the time, the solutions that they want to use it for, they don't need blockchain, right? So corporates, I once had a startup tell me that innovation teams within corporates are where startups go to die. And unfortunately, innovation teams, as much as they have the best interests at heart of the startup and the organization, due to bureaucracy, due to red tape, they're fighting, they're trying to push water uphill. And I think if corporate engagement and corporate innovation works, like, you have to look at a corporate internally first of all, and having worked in a corporate and tried to instill a startup program, an innovation program, they're just, a lot of businesses, big businesses, are just not set up still to deal with corporate, especially in blockchain. One of our most promising companies is dealing with the construction industry. Your procurement cycles in construction are nearly 3 years. A startup's dead within 3 months, right? And it's an industry that desperately needs to innovate. It has over £3 billion a year in inefficiencies alone that is lost in construction. So if it doesn't innovate soon, it's just going to fall off the face of the earth. But they're still not realizing that, shit, we need to catch up. Like, they're barely digital, let alone using really innovative solutions. So how do you take organizations, and again, this is where I slightly disagree, that certain industries in the corporate world are still so far behind. They still need to engage with early stage businesses and accelerators, incubators, whatever you want to call it, because they're barely digital. And I think that's really important, that you look at an industry specifically before you lump everyone into the startup ecosystem and the corporate ecosystem, because everyone is still at different stages and has different resources available to them.
Yeah, but I see 3 different pillars how corporates innovate: through VC fund, through corporate innovation. Maybe you can tell me,
Not VC fund.
You work with more than 50% of Fortune 500. So what's
10%.
your experience?
10%. Yeah. So what was the question in terms of what are the vehicles for corporate innovation?
For corporate innovations, yeah.
Okay, so simply put, right, you need a different type of strategy to basically drive a balanced portfolio approach of innovation initiatives. The reason being is that when you're talking about innovation, by definition, you're talking about a higher level of uncertainty. And as uncertainty increases, the normal strategic toolkit does not apply, right? If you can DCF it, if you can do benchmarks and relative, it just doesn't apply. So that's the biggest missing middle is the innovation strat piece. How to get weak signals to direct a portfolio approach of initiatives, which are sort of near-term, medium-term, and long-term, and apply the right vehicle for that level of uncertainty. And that really translates to, if you've got proper innovation strat, you have to do internal innovation, so it's about getting a skill set up, like a training and development of getting employees upskilled, new processes, new structures to ideate internally and process things internally. And then you have to do corporate startup engagement, but in a non-programmatic format. Don't bother engaging with early stage startups and ecosystems. It's really not that invaluable. Or if you are, do it in a learning capacity, which isn't really a program sponsorship. There are different mechanisms for doing that. And then 3, for the big ticket stuff, you're going to have to do some venture building, right? And that's a scenario where if you're building brand new business models, you can talk about how to do that. I would strongly urge you not trying to do that yourself. And then corporate venture capital, to me, is the biggest Ponzi scheme of our time. 75% of all VC funds lose everything. How do you justify spending shareholders' money, 50, 100, 200 million quids worth of shareholders' money when you've got a 75% chance of losing everything? 95% of all the VC returns globally are delivered by the top 20 VC funds. Your corporate venture capital fund will not be one of those because the deal flow is already done. That, just to be clear, as well as a lot of the issues in corporate innovation, is a byproduct of the emotional path of least resistance. What do I mean by that? If you work in group strategy or corporate development and you can sell to the board, we need a VC fund, and you get to run it, that's a much better Monday to Friday for you. You drop the tie, you're in the startup ecosystem, the CEO turns up 3 years later, how are you doing? Oh, we made some investments, doing really, really well. Too early to tell. And so from that scenario, the kind of personal approach of building a better job for oneself, like, I don't disparage that, but that's why a lot of bad decisions are made in this innovation space.
I just want to be conscious of time and ask Andrew a question about potentially new government policies. I've been working with Department of International Trade and Tech Nation, Tech City UK. What are your thoughts on how we can drive ecosystem development even further after the B word?
Can I half answer the last question as well as answer this question?
Please do, please do.
So the challenge with corporates is you're turning the Titanic. So the good news is most of them have now realized that hackathons are really useful for their internal challenges, but that running a hackathon to get people to come and start a business or start an idea at a weekend in their office is not the answer to anything ever, right? However, there is still a very important role that they have to play in trialing and testing products and paying startups for that, right? So in order for there to be an ecosystem where there are businesses that can raise an A round, in Europe you need 100,000 a month in revenue to raise a significant A round. In order to get there, you have to have customers. In order to do that, you have to prove how your product is. So the next challenge for us all is to make sure that enough big companies, this is for all of us, understand that you have to pay for a trial, it shouldn't be free, and you have to put the time and effort in to have the right people and the right relationships in order to make that happen internally, the right buy-in, right? There's loads of programs, not like any of ours, that happen. The CEO throws 50 grand at 7 companies and actually doesn't talk to any of the senior stakeholders in a business. And so you can't even get to a trial when you've made a significant investment, you've told the shareholders you're doing it, significant things are happening, and nothing comes from it. However, because we've got less than 2 minutes left, I think what's fascinating about our ecosystem is the government played an incredible role in advocacy of it around the world and in terms of supporting it, not just in terms of the policy that we have in terms of tax incentives for angel investment, in terms of visas, et cetera, which are very important with that B word thing coming up that we're not talking about. And the role that they'll continue to play long term has never been more important. Unless we exit from, we're coming towards the end of 10 years in our ecosystem, unless we see some exits. If we lose every billion dollar business in London because they IPO in New York, we will have no ecosystem. We won't be having fintech events in 5 years' time if London doesn't actually make any exits and doesn't create it. The majority of our entrepreneurs come from elsewhere and they'll reinvest elsewhere, right? So,
even though UK has one of the leading government policies with all the tax reliefs and stuff, we still have to fight for it. So I just want to ask a question. You all mentioned experts, mentors, coaches, advisors. I would like to bring this. I saw very interesting things that UK to do at State Zero, and it's in line with mental health and the bro approach to potentially using alternative things to measure success as happiness, use microdosing, and then various different things. So can you please tell me more about your approach to that?
Yeah, so I suppose that the core that runs through our program, is very much that we focus on founder well-being. A healthy founder equals a healthy business, and I've seen some absolute huge disasters from, unfortunately, founders just not being able to deal with the pressure that's put on them, usually from external sources, usually investors, once they've taken some form of investment. Businesses that had so much potential have fallen by the wayside. And so we've actually set up the InvestWell community, which is 25 of the top VCs across London, who came together and said, we know we need to act and do something about this, but there are no industry standards, there's no frameworks, like where the hell do we start? And how do you track well-being against ROI and prove to your portfolio, to your LPs, to your kind of chair, that there is intrinsic value to looking after well-being, right? It's not just a fluffy thing that sits on the side. It's really important to the business elements and the commercial viability of businesses. And so someone asked me the other day, actually, do you think emotional well-being and mental well-being are one and the same? And I was like, no, actually, I think one's very much proactive. You know, you can be very proactive as an investor or as an early stage supporter of businesses to the kind of mental well-being of founders. Absolutely. You can give them all the tools, all the necessary information to try and equip them for the journey that they're about to go on. Because let's be honest, it's mentally tough. But emotional well-being is very reactive, right? And so you need to make sure that you're catering from both sides. And so as an InvestWell community, what we're trying to do right now is to come up with a framework around what it looks like as what's good mental and emotional well-being and physical well-being as an investor for your founders. How do you track that? What are the kind of key signals that you need to be looking for? And how do you then link that intrinsically to the kind of portfolio growth and the success of your portfolio? And there's no answers to that yet. I'm just saying we're all working on that because it's really freaking tough to prove that it has actual power to grow a business and that it affects bottom line, because most people don't think about that.
I think it's very important that you're doing. And lastly, could you potentially tell where people can dive in or see latest opportunities?
I think the last thing I really wanted to say is how important it is that the technology community represents itself with government. Back to that point, you know, every other major industry has a serious, well-funded policy group which drafts policy, is constantly bashing government on everything that it wants. You know, we have Codec, which does a brilliant job with a 2-person team. It's very difficult to get people to put money into it. They're the only body that really drafts policy and engages government on a regular basis to get them into this space. We mustn't forget that, you know, going to a breakfast that Tech Nation runs is not feeding into government policy and making sure it represents us properly.
Where can people find more about your companies, dive in and potentially explore some opportunities? Because we have loads of startups in the room.
Sure. From my perspective, if you're a startup and you're interested in an accelerator program,
don't go there.
No, it's valuable. Startupbootcamp.org. From a corporate standpoint, it's rainmaking.io.
StateZeroLabs.com, come and speak to us. There's a couple of us here today. And yeah, we're always open. We actually are running a new business model moving forward we offer equity-free funding as well as equity funding. So we're doing shared revenue schemes for startups that don't want to give away equity but need some cash injection up front. Also allows us to be a slightly more sustainable business model moving forward. We said that models are broken and we appreciate that and we're trying to change that. We also have a peer investment-led scheme. So our cohort chooses where our funding goes on the next one. We've recognised that entrepreneurs make way better decisions at investing in other entrepreneurs than investors do, and we do. And we're trying to harness that and kind of prove that works. So yeah, come and have a chat.
Cool. And we're at foundersfactoryafrica.com. We are hiring lots of people. Building, everyone here knows, putting resources behind building businesses is hard. If you are interested in emerging markets and you are a builder and are willing to let me convince you of the charms and beauty of Johannesburg in August, come talk. We'd love that. Not Cape Town, Johannesburg. But that's us.
So we have, I believe, some questions from the slide.
Yeah, we really need you to take this question because I was feeling a bit depressed as well. So I'm so glad someone in the audience asked this question. We've heard a lot about how tough it is and how the system's broken. So let's have an upmarket dream scenario to end the panel so we end the conference happy. You're the last panel. Help us out here.
I find this early stage space the most inspiring space to be in, right? You're going to meet some of the most interesting characters that have the biggest ideas that really want to solve problems. And I think if you love that and you have to be passionate about that and you have to get the risks that are involved with that, then the early stage ecosystem is the best place to be when it comes to technology. And yeah, it has its pitfalls, like every industry does. But I genuinely love meeting the people that I meet every day and feel absolutely privileged to deal with the people that we deal with and work alongside them. And I think, every day is a learning day. Every day is a school day when you work in this early stage space. And if that floats your boat, then this is a space to be. It doesn't, and London is, yes, it has its problems. We know the big B word's coming. That is going to prove problems for the early stage ecosystem. I actually heard someone say the other day that it's going to prove some problems, and you're going to see probably a drop-off in accelerators and incubators, probably for the best, actually. But realistically, we have some of the brightest, bestest minds here, and use them. Corporates have so much they can learn from this ecosystem. The ecosystem has so much it can learn from corporates, and I think it's about harnessing everyone's potential, really, and just loving it. I wouldn't work anywhere else.
We just mentioned that briefly, but we're far from criticism. London is the best place to start a business in Europe, and
maybe Joburg. Just saying.
By far the best, and even the government policies and everything. The UK is the only government that have the programs for the startups, visas, tax relief, like so many things. It's great. We just want to make it to be the best, world best. I suppose
the reason that 30% of the venture capital in the market goes into fintech is because the FCA has enshrined in its pure existence to encourage and nurture an innovative business environment for fintech. Right? And I'm really excited that the former Director General of DCMS, Matthew Gould's, just left this week to set up NHSX, which is going to be, potentially the way to get that type of policy enshrined into healthcare, and that's the next sector. I mean, Berlin would have a bigger ecosystem than London without fintech, which, if you think of that, is pretty serious. And so let's whack another billion on by being as good as we are at fintech, at healthcare, and let's whack another billion on by doing that properly with cyber, and that's how we'll make it work. Oh, Andrew at techhub.com, by the way.
Mine is simple. Last year, U.S. and venture capital did roughly, I think it was 78 billion in new powder, and all of Africa last year was a banner year, 50% growth year on year, did 1.2 billion in venture capital. To me, a utopian, perfect future scenario is where that gap disappears. And I am a full believer in the fact that a continent of over a billion people that has the youngest populations on the planet. You have countries where 50% of the population is under 25. You have Ethiopia, which is a country of almost 100 million people, where the internet is effectively turned off. So there's no question about potential, and so that utopian future scenario to me is one where there is no gap between that funding, and that's a result of ecosystems and governments, sure, but fundamentally it's a question of putting the resources behind building businesses and irrigating it such that the businesses that exist, because there are entrepreneurs and businesses that are ready to take on that capital, giving them a platform and a pipeline to do that.
It's a great social impact that you're doing on the world's largest continent. So just a fact, from Startup Grind point of view, we're now the world's largest community of entrepreneurs, over 640 cities. And just last year alone, we had over 200 chapters opened in Africa. So that's a massive impact, how they use technology and an internet. So it's very positive.
I was just going to add that I think if there's any industry that can really solve some of the biggest global challenges we have, it's the early stage tech ecosystem. You have, the biggest visionaries out there, and you need people like that to really look at the problems that we have. And we've got a shit ton of them right now, right? As a global society. And if there's going to be anyone that fixes that, or any people or any ecosystem that fixes that, it's the early stage tech one. And I think that's the most exciting piece.
I was just going to say, your billion in Africa goes really far as well, doesn't it? You get a huge amount for your money.
Exactly. So yeah. So one of the parts that after the B word, what Department of International Trade does is they work with non-EU parts of Europe or emerging countries, and my job at DIT is to be a champion of Balkans, which is actually a non-EU part of Europe, where we see this influx of people coming, talents, even having new visas that just been launched called innovator visas and startup teams that's coming later this year. We have loads of lower valuations from these startups, and when they come here, they're valued 10 times more or something, and they really have like this great untapped the passion and talent that's really good to have. So I think we are reliant on those other continents to make this bridge between the UK and the rest of the world. Like Rainmaking is in how many countries now with startup bootcamp?
Well, I mean, from an office perspective, we have 12 offices, but we're in many more countries than that through our programs.
Bootcamp, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's probably close to 17, maybe 22 max. Just to answer the utopian piece, I think in my dream world, right? So that question is obviously to whom, whether it's corporates, investors, governments, whatever. But the way I'd like to answer that question is my dream world is to get entrepreneurship as a subject into secondary education and higher education and done properly. And I mean that. So some years ago, I founded a business called Founder-Centric, which was focusing on entrepreneurship education. And the main reason for doing that is I looked at the statistic, 75% of all ventures, startups fail. And I was like, that is not good enough. Why do we even accept that? That is just like BS. And the truth is, having made a ton of mistakes and been through it myself prior to that, I kind of realized that it doesn't have to be that way. And in my opinion, founders sort of suck by default because of lack of education. They don't really have the right mindsets, the right skills, the right know-how, whether that's entrepreneur, whatever, right? And to me, again, I think the tech side of entrepreneurship, the Silicon Valley side, takes up far too much of the PR story, right? VC-backed billion-dollar unicorns, whatever. Like, the backbone of any country is SMEs, and they're not venture-backed, and they'll never be venture-backed. And how do we sit there and de-risk that way of life for people who are starting small to medium businesses to become the biggest employers in any country? And to me, that comes back down to an education point. And I would love to get it as a proper subject embedded in our secondary and higher educations.
Thank you. Okay, if you want to say some closing remarks, I just want to thank this panel for a really powerful, stimulating conversation. I love that last point because I think if we don't overhaul the education system, we're not creating the future that we need to have. And people have been talking about jobs being lost. What are our kids going to do? We need to teach them how to set up their own businesses, and we need to teach them how to be digital. So, sorry, I just took your closing remarks. Have you got... Would you like to close your panel?
Well, please join me in welcoming our panelists. In thanking our panelists.